The Amazing Spider-Man is criminally underrated. Way back in 2012 during its release and for many years after, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies were pushed aside as some of the worst pieces of superhero media for a long time. That is until No Way Home was released. Then everyone loved him all of a sudden. Like, where were y'all at when I had to fight in comment sections for my boy? But I stand here today to say I was one of the OGs. I watched this movie in 2012 when it was initially released, and I liked it back then, and I still love it today. Since rewatching the movie, I wanted to dive deeper into the characterization of Peter Parker and see how Mark Webb utilized sacrifice to push Peter forward along this story and amplify his strengths as a hero because of them. This movie is richly layered with some fascinating themes. So let's take a stroll down the Spider-Man lane and break down why the Amazing Spider-Man is genuinely amazing.
You're gonna stay with that man, Uncle Ben, for a little while.
I want to go with you.
The movie opens up with the dramatic scene involving the last time Peter Parker sees his parents. And right away, Mark Webb tries to differentiate himself from the previous trilogy. A lot of people view the parent arc in the Amazing Spider-Man duology to be convenient and not Spider-Man-like. Although I agree with this statement for the second movie, I still think the way it's used as a plot device in this first movie is great, and it adds excellent dramatic weight to the characterization of Peter Parker. So early on in Peter's life, he had to deal with things out of his control and had to deal with trauma because of it. He had to sacrifice his connection with his parents, leading to them dying in the plane crash. He was forced to let go and disconnect so early on in his life that when times like this arise in his future years, he's already dealt with this feeling of discomfort. Mark Webb had to follow up on one of the most influential comic book trilogies of all time only 5 years after it ended. That's a tough break. In most cases, people would say this doesn't live up to the original 2002 movie, but in my case, I think it's outlandish to try and compare the two at all. The movies have different things they want to say, whereas the original Spider-Man deals with learning responsibility and becoming a hero requires having a good moral compass. The Amazing Spider-Man strikes a chord that, with great power, also comes great sacrifice. I know many of the Spider-Man movies deal with sacrifice. Heck, Tom Holland lost everyone he knows in No Way Home, but I believe that sacrifice is deeply layered in The Amazing Spider-Man as its primary theme, making it the main driving force for why Peter acts the way he does. Everyone looks at Andrew's Peter as being too cool, and riding skateboards makes you badass apparently, but he's still an outcast. He doesn't open up to people quickly because the two people closest to him died when he was so young. He's someone who sits in the background taking pictures of those who don't want to be seen either, yet he still carries heart. Even before having powers, we see who Peter Parker is on the inside. Someone who deeply cares about helping others even if he's the underdog in the fight. Take the movie theater scene in Captain America: The First Avenger. If that dictated who Steve Rogers was in his heart, then the scene where Peter stands up to Flash for the scrawny teenager depicts Peter's. He's someone who will take the hits for someone else as long as they come out okay. And Gwen, who has a similar moral compass, talks about this.
I thought that was great what you did out there. It was stupid, but it was great.
What I love about this movie compared to the original trilogy is how much we see of Peter using his intellect. We only saw a few scenes here or there of Peter getting an answer right in class in the original trilogy, but right away, even before getting powers, Peter immediately knows how to fix the flooding issue in his basement and deconstructs his father's formula, let alone the fact he built his web shooters in this incredible montage scene. But what stood out to me the most in the first act of this movie was the importance of Uncle Ben. How he wasn't sidelined, but a main focus in how Peter was raised. You see the impact of Ben's teachings on Peter well before he dies. How Peter genuinely takes in his advice and says,
"You're a pretty great dad, right?"
Compared to the original trilogy, obviously the great power line is iconic, but I think in representing Ben as a whole, the Amazing Spider-Man movie dominates in that category. Uncle Ben is always there, distilling a great heap of moral advice to Peter, teaching him how to be there for others when you say you're supposed to, opening Peter's shell up a little so he can speak to Gwen more confidently, and supporting Peter in his academic endeavors. Where Uncle Ben felt like a god figurehead in the original, Uncle Ben feels like a real down-to-earth man looking out for Peter and his best interests. Ben teaching Peter about humility and ways to be the bigger man after Peter humiliates Flash was so well done to me. The back and forth conversation of a young, inexperienced teenager with a wizened uncle who is more like a father figure is so touching. When it all leads to the new, albeit worse version of the great power comes great responsibility line, it makes sense as to why Ben says it. Peter's selfishness took center stage to ignore his Aunt May and not pick her up when he agreed to it, in order to work with Dr. Connors on his behalf. Ben sees so much potential in this version of Peter, yet is being sabotaged by his own ego and selfishness. is, which is best portrayed in this version of the character compared to that of the original trilogy and Tom Holland's movies. This moral philosophy being bestowed upon Peter so early on in his life drives Peter to be who he's meant to be and why he has such good convictions, although selfish at the start. When Ben dies, however, that sacrifice comes back into Peter's life, flooding in all the bad memories from before when he lost his parents.
He's hunting down a bunch of criminals that all look the same, like he's got some sort of personal vendetta. But he's not protecting innocent people, Mr. Parker.
This is Peter's canon event. Jokes aside, this moment signifies everything Peter hates about himself. Letting the wrongdoer go just to spite another person for treating him badly, or seeing innocent lives be hurt even though he could have stopped it. Was it stupid for Uncle Ben to try and stop a guy with a gun? Very much so, yes. But Peter still could have been the one to intervene, which is what plays a significant role in most Spider-Man media, like with the original trilogy, Spectacular Spider-Man, and the comics. This is another person in Peter's life who sacrificed themselves to stop evil in the world. Although Uncle Ben's words shone a new light on Peter and his philosophy towards crime fighting, it wasn't so black and white for this version of Peter, and I appreciated that. Although I don't think this takes away from the movie, I believe Peter raging over Uncle Ben's death in the original Spider-Man lasted too quickly for me. He used his powers for bad to inadvertently kill a guy and then became the superhero we love, which works perfectly for that film, but I generally love the take they did for this film. Having Peter fight crime for days and weeks to track down the man who murdered his uncle was a new and exciting take on the character, really taking on that vigilante persona. To him, this is what justice looks like. Fighting evilgoers at nighttime, hiding behind a mask, hoping not to let anyone go through what he went through. Why do I hear Hans Zimmer? Peter building his suit when he's not ready yet is still very interesting. He was still in his revenge arc when making his web shooters and main suit, and it's not until over halfway into the movie that Peter learns what he's truly meant to be to the people of New York. Peter's grief, lasting for days and weeks in this movie, feels raw, and Mark Webb lets that play out in a very authentic way. There is some sadness, yes, like Peter not being able to listen to Uncle Ben's messages right away, or taking his anger out on Flash. But he's also becoming more confident and vengeful as soon as he starts making the new suit. It's not like he sat around and moped for 2 hours, made terrible jokes, and shut everyone he loved out of his life. Looking at you, Lotus.
You don't want to be like this.
He just amplified specific characteristics that blinded him, enhancing his ego. Look at the fight scene with the car thief. Peter's having a joyride mocking and hazing this carjacker, poking fun at his attempts at crime and making jokes about being a cop, but he's still vengeful. He's only taking out criminals that directly benefit his grief. Putting these guys out of crime is great, but they're the only guys that fit the description of Uncle Ben's killer. It's a very nuanced portrayal of vigilantism. Before, I mentioned how this movie isn't a black and white character interpretation, and this is what I'm talking about. Peter is a misguided, vengeful vigilante in the second act of this movie, and although he's wearing his iconic outfit, which I love to death by the way, I think the suit is massively underrated. It doesn't mean he's in the mindset of being the hero that Uncle Ben knew he was going to be. As depicted in the scene with Captain Stacy in their apartment, Peter thinks he's doing justice for the city when, in reality, he's just on a wild goose chase hunting down criminals for his agenda, not thinking about how that's affecting the police force and their investigations. Peter's turn into the hero we know doesn't come until a desperate father needs help saving his son, which Peter has longed for since childhood.
Who are you? Spider-Man.
The Brooklyn Bridge scene is so good at embracing the character of Spider-Man because it ties in all the lessons Peter has learned up until that point. Peter sees himself in the little boy he needs to save, a kid whose circumstances aren't his fault but entirely out of his control. And in this scenario, Peter has the opportunity to intervene and not look the other way. Instead of vying for revenge against the Lizard or looking for more bad guys that look like Uncle Ben's killer, Peter goes to save the one kid who needs help. Peter takes the lessons he learns from Captain Stacy. He was humbled to realize his actions have had consequences. In this scene, however, Peter steps into the role Uncle Ben and Aunt May know he's capable of being. The man who helps the unfortunate whenever he can. I love the part where the little kid puts on the mask, signifying that anyone can be Spider-Man, until it's retconned in the next movie, but forget about that. It's a great message to spread, but also the fact that the mask can make you stronger and fight back against fear. It's like Spider-Man's becoming a symbol of strength and power that I thought was portrayed very well here. Congratulations, Mark, here's a gold star. It's at this moment, after 2/3 of the movie have passed, where Peter truly becomes Spider-Man, letting vengeance go and becoming the hero the city needs. Man, this is such a good scene that represents the character of Spidey. He knows what the symbol means and how influential his powers can be for the greater good. So when the Lizard continues terrorizing the city, he knows he has a responsibility to help. In arguably one of the best Spider-Man scenes to date, Spidey's importance to the city takes center stage. When he helped save the little boy from the bridge disaster, he inadvertently left a massive debt to the dad he helped. The crane scene is so amazing because it shows how resourceful the city truly is. Instead of trying to fight the bad guy themselves, they do what it is accessible to them, and that's using the manufacturing tools they got to give Spidey an easy way to get across the city. Also, the symbolism of Peter getting back up on his feet to continue fighting is so awesome to see. The sacrifices Peter made have influenced the city for the better, and they have become more trusting to his endeavors. And come on, James Horner's score in this scene? Masterful, but not talked about enough, honestly. Spidey's theme for this movie is better than Hans Zimmer's in my opinion, and I love Hans Zimmer. Also, the aspect ratio change when Peter's about to run to the cranes? Beautiful. Never noticed it until someone pointed it out on an Instagram post, so I have to thank them for that hidden detail. It's so cathartic to see a Spider-Man movie that cares so deeply about finding people you care about in the strangest of scenarios. When Peter is about to get his head crushed in by the lizard, Captain Stacy comes to Peter's rescue to give him enough time to use the antidote. Like the theme keeps suggesting, this movie keeps making Peter lose people that are close to him to make him realize that being the protector of the city has its consequences. He sacrificed another person who means a lot to him for it, and it's an excruciating thing to process. Even more so when he's given a command to stop seeing Gwen, even though the last line retcons it, which I still have an issue with. To try and honor the person by sacrificing a new relationship is hard, and for Peter, who's lost so much over the 17 years he's been alive, he's still battling all the sacrifices he's had to make since day one. But with the new purpose in providing the city with protection and finally fulfilling Uncle Ben's message by the end of the movie. It's admirable that Peter stands tall, watching over the city that has taken so much from him, yet brought him a new purpose like no other. The Amazing Spider-Man isn't talked about enough for top-tier Spider-Man media. Yeah, it has its issues, mainly with the lizard, but I think this is the top 5 Spider-Man movie by far. Seeing the new ways Mark Webb tried to introduce the character was fantastic, especially having to up the game since the 2002 version. Andrew Garfield is easily the best actor to portray the Webhead in live action, and it's such a shame The Amazing Spider-Man 3 has been shelved. Hopefully, he can return, with his popularity skyrocketing after No Way Home released. This movie has such heart and humility and portrays some of the best on-screen characterization of Peter Parker, through his complex relationships, to his egocentric attitude, to learning how to be a hero. It's all just so amazing! I hope you guys enjoyed this video. What are your thoughts on The Amazing Spider-Man? Is it as underrated as I say? Or am I just wrong? Let me know with a comment down below, and hit that like button too, because YouTube likes when people like stuff. Feel free to subscribe while you're at it. In the meantime, go ahead and watch my other Spider-Man videos if you're looking for some more Spidey related content, or check out my latest video because I put a lot of time into it and it would mean a lot to me. I can't wait to see y'all in the next one. That's all for me today. I love you guys for watching. Peace out.